Imagine a 5-year-old child kneeling behind the altar, forehead pressed against the tabernacle, whispering secrets to the Eucharistic Jesus, alone, in silence, as if he were listening to God's very heartbeat. But this isn't a metaphor, it's real, the beginning of a life that would set the world ablaze with the light of adoration. That boy would grow up to confront the abandonment of the tabernacles, found entire congregations in the name of the Blessed Sacrament, and die consumed by the mission to bring souls before Jesus in the consecrated host. He would become the apostle of the Eucharist, a story that begins with hidden prayers and ends with a miracle that changed the church calendar forever. But what did he face to fulfill this mission? What did Mary reveal to him? Why did so many abandon him when he needed them most? What you are about to hear might forever change your relationship with the Eucharist. If your soul has already felt something in these first seconds, subscribe now to the Heaven's Breath channel, because what will be revealed could reignite the sleeping faith in your heart. France, 1811. A time when the world still bore the wounds of the revolution and altars seemed colder, more distant. Faith survived in shadows, upheld by kneeling mothers, hidden priests, and children like Peter Julian Eymard, consecrated to a mystery from the womb. L'amour désert was just a forgotten village on the map of politics. But there, among mountains and silence, something moved in the invisible. Peter's mother, simple and devout, took him to church daily for the Eucharistic blessing. The light of the monstrance was shaping his soul before he could even speak. He didn't play like other boys. He preferred silence, behind the altar, his forehead against the tabernacle. When asked what he was doing, he would calmly say, "I listened to Jesus better this way." Childhood ended early. His father, a hard-working man, needed help with the family walnut oil business, and the boy who wanted to be a priest began carrying baskets and making deliveries, but he always stopped at the church. He would touch the cold altar stone and whisper, "Lord, make me your priest." At 12, he received his first communion, and in that instant, something ignited within him. A call. Not a sound, but a certainty. His whole life would belong to the Eucharist. But the path would not be easy. His father forbade him from entering seminary. Peter obeyed and continued working, but secretly studied Latin by candlelight. When his mother died, he fell to his knees before an image of Our Lady and said, "Now be my only mother, and grant me one grace, to belong to the altar." At 18, after much struggle, he entered seminary. Ordained at 23, he began his priestly life. But something inside remained restless. God was preparing him for something greater. In 1839, he joined the Marists. For 17 years, he lived as a religious, preaching, helping the sick, visiting prisoners, instructing workers. He saw the growing spiritual indifference. And during a Eucharistic procession, as he held the monstrance, his heart was pierced with fire, like St. Paul's zeal poured into his soul. But the final call would come from a woman clothed in light. On the hill of Fourvière, kneeling before Mary's image, he heard words that changed everything. "Peter, rekindle love. Honor the Eucharist. Save souls with my son's body." From that moment on, everything would change. There's no sacred fire without ashes, and Peter Julian knew it. When he left the Marists to start something new, he didn't depart surrounded by crowds. He left with 2 companions and a promise. No certainty, no resources, no home, only Mary's voice echoing, "Honor my son in the Eucharist." He went straight to the Archbishop of Paris with his bold project, a congregation dedicated entirely to perpetual adoration and Eucharistic evangelization. Some doubted him, but the Archbishop saw something in his eyes, a fire that could not be faked. "This is the work our diocese needs," the Archbishop said. On May 13, 1856, the Congregation of the Blessed Sacrament was born. 3 members and a small chapel where the Eucharist was exposed day and night for the first time. But not everyone saw light in that chapel. Criticism came, defections. Even Count Raymond de Cuir, his closest disciple, abandoned the cause to start his own. It was like having a piece of his heart ripped away. People mocked the idea, said perpetual adoration was useless, called him obsessed with a medieval notion. Even the adorers began with enthusiasm, but soon tired, especially during night vigils. The number dwindled. Peter would kneel through cold, sleepless nights, crying silently before the host. When no one showed up, he watched alone. Outwardly, the work seemed doomed, but inwardly, God was building eternal foundations. Physical suffering joined spiritual pain. A cerebral hemorrhage nearly killed him. His voluntary penances and constant fasting consumed his body, yet he never complained. He said, "I fear the day when trials cease." But the most piercing pain was God's silence. How many times have you felt the same? You start with faith, but halfway through, all you find is opposition and abandonment. If this pain echoes something in your life, write in the comments, "I believe," and share this story with someone who needs to know that suffering is part of the mission. A small chapel in the outskirts of Paris became known as the Chapel of Miracles. There, against all odds, the impossible began to happen. It was 1858. Just a few priests, some sisters, and a handful of lay adorers taking turns at night. But those who knelt before the Blessed Sacrament never left the same. Physical healings emerged. A paralyzed man walked, a barren woman conceived. Broken marriages were reconciled before the host in silence. But the greatest miracle, conversions. Skeptics, anti-clericals, hardened laborers, knelt with disdain and rose in tears. They touched something beyond human words. Christ himself speaking directly to their souls. One of the most striking cases was a young anarchist who entered to mock. But when he looked at the monstrance, he collapsed. Hours later, he asked for baptism. Word spread like wildfire. More houses opened in Grenoble, Lyon, Marseille. The congregation grew, vocations flourished. Young men gave themselves to the Eucharistic call with prophetic fervor. Pope Pius IX, after meeting Peter Julian, said, "Your work comes from God, and the Church needs it." In 1863, official approval came. The brief of praise gave full recognition to the Congregation of the Blessed Sacrament. The vision of a boy kneeling behind the altar had become an army of adorers bringing Jesus to the forgotten corners of France. Then something even more extraordinary happened, the first Eucharistic Congresses. Inspired by Peter, a young woman named Sister Emiliana began organizing massive events to spread Eucharistic love. The first, in Lille, 1881, gathered thousands under the theme, "The Eucharist Saves the World." And all of it began with a boy who whispered, "I listen to Jesus better this way." 21st century. The world spins faster than ever, yet souls are emptier than ever. Racing bodies, exhausted minds, numb hearts. We're surrounded by technology, but far from the sacred. There's urgency for everything except adoration. Peter Julian Eymard called it the slumber of indifference. What he saw in the 19th century has multiplied to terrifying levels today. How many tabernacles are forgotten in our churches? How often do we walk past a chapel and never glance? How many practicing Catholics no longer believe in the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist? Peter's anguish is our own. He said, "The loss of faith comes from the loss of love." And his answer was simple and bold. Jesus in the Eucharist is the solution, not as ritual, but as a living, burning, transforming presence. Do you feel distant from God? Do you pray? but everything feels dry? Do you believe, but your soul is lukewarm? Maybe what's missing is what Peter called the center of the Christian life, the tabernacle. Not a concept, but a person. Jesus, alive, whole, waiting in silence, to be adored. Picture it, a moment of stillness, a wooden pew, the light of the monstrance, your heart exposed before the one who sees all, heals all, transforms all. Life's storms don't stop. But before the Blessed Sacrament, they lose their power. Peter once said, "An hour at the feet of Jesus in the Eucharist is worth more than an entire morning of study." How many poor decisions could have been avoided with just 10 minutes before the altar? How many marriages saved? How many youth restored? How many anxieties dissolved in Eucharistic silence? St. Peter Julian Eymard's legacy isn't buried in the past. He burned with one desire: to reignite love in the Church and to reignite love in you. If your faith has gone cold, maybe it's time to return to the altar. Maybe it's time to place Jesus at the center again. July 1868. His body was failing, his mind clear but weary. His heart, though, still beat in rhythm with the Eucharistic heart of Jesus. Peter Julian, now 57, had given all, every breath, every homily, every silent vigil. Doctors ordered total rest. He returned to Namur, the very town where as a child he had leaned into the tabernacle to listen to Jesus better. Days later, his body gave out. A cerebral hemorrhage struck. He could no longer speak. He made his confession through signs, yet even in silence, his hands remembered the way of the cross. On August 1st, Father Chanouet celebrated Mass in his bedroom. At the end, he brought him Holy Communion. One last time. That host, the one he had loved all his life, became his final food, his viaticum, his eternity. And when he passed, there were no cries, just a whisper among the townspeople. A saint has died. But heaven did not stay silent for long. Soon after his death, miracles began. Those who prayed before his tomb received healing, unexpected graces, reconciliations, conversions. The voice of the Apostle of the Eucharist was still echoing beyond the grave. In 1925, he was beatified by Pope Pius V. And on December 9, 1962, one day after the close of the first session of the Second Vatican Council, Pope John XXIII canonized him before 500 council fathers, a prophetic sign for the Church. 33 years later, his name was inscribed in the Roman calendar with the title that summarized his life, Apostle of the Eucharist. And as he loved to repeat, echoing St. Paul, we preach nothing but Jesus Christ, and Jesus Christ in the Blessed Sacrament. 21 Corinthians 1:23. The world may forget names, temples may crumble, books may fade, but love offered before the Blessed Sacrament is never lost. Peter Julian Eymard wasn't just a priest, not just a founder. He was a living altar consumed in silence to reignite what many no longer saw, the invisible flame of the Eucharistic Jesus, real, present, and burning. And now, that flame is in your hands. Maybe you can't start a congregation. Maybe you can't preach to crowds, but you can enter a chapel. You can kneel, you can whisper, Jesus, I adore you. And that changes everything. If this story touched your heart, write in the comments, Jesus in the Eucharist, I trust in you. Share this video with someone who needs to return to the altar, return to the source, return to the presence, return to love. And if you feel something awakening in your soul, subscribe now to the Heaven's Breath channel. Here, we tell stories that touch the invisible to transform the now, because there are hearts waiting to hear what you just heard. And there is a God waiting for you in the silence of the tabernacle.